All right, everyone. Ready to dive into some deep stuff today. We're talking judgment. And, well, the end of the world.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, no, I know.
Great stuff.
It's heavy but fascinating, really.
Definitely.
Our jumping off point for all this is a sermon based on the Gospel of Matthew,
Okay.
chapter 24, to be exact.
This-
Specifically verses 29 through 42,
Right.
36 and 42.
Got it.
Now, I know, end of the world talk, maybe not everyone's cup of tea, right?
Yeah, it can be a bit intense for some.
But what I found so interesting about this sermon is it's not just fire and brimstone. It uses these really powerful images and stories, but it makes it relatable.
I agree.
Even if even if you're not familiar with religious texts.
I think that's one of the things that makes this sermon so compelling. Yeah.
Yeah.
It starts off, with this really like almost cinematic picture of the end times.
Oh, yeah.
Right there in Matthew 29 to 31.
Yeah.
Sun going dark, stars are falling, the whole.
The whole dramatic scene.
But then it does something really interesting. It grounds that with an analogy that we can all kind of grasp.
You mean the fig tree?
Exactly, the fig tree. It uses this everyday image, right? Something we've all seen, a fig tree budding, and summer's coming.
Right, you just know.
Yeah, you just know.
Yeah.
And it connects that to those huge signs of Jesus's return, right? In Matthew 24.32 and 33.
Oh, that's fascinating how it brings those two things together.
It's basically saying, look, these signs, they're as clear, as undeniable as knowing summertime's on its way when you see those fig leaves pop.
I see. So it's about recognizing those signs, right? Being present, paying attention.
I think that's a huge part of it.
I like that. But judgment, that's a loaded word. It can mean so many different things.
Yeah. It can be pretty heavy, huh?
So what's the sermon's take on it?
Well, it actually breaks it down into three types of judgment.
Just three.
We've got personal judgment, historical judgment, and then, cosmic judgment.
Oh, okay. So let's break those down a bit. Starting with personal judgment. What does that even mean?
Well, this is where the sermon gets really introspective,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It argues that those living in darkness.
Living in darkness, okay.
Yeah, and it actually quotes John 3.1819 here. It says they're already judged.
That's interesting.
It's not some future event.
Mm-hmm.
It's a present reality.
It's happening now.
Yeah, right now.
But what does living in darkness mean?
Right. It can sound kind of abstract, a little vague maybe.
Oh.
So the sermon actually brings in this real-life story to kind of illustrate the point.
Oh, I like that.
It talks about this factory worker
Okay.
who committed a crime. And he got away with it, legally speaking.
Wow.
But for 11 years, he lived in this constant state of fear,
Oh, wow.
anxiety.
Yeah.
Just completely haunted by what he did. He felt totally cut off, isolated.
So it's like the internal consequences, right? It's not about the external punishment.
Exactly.
It's about what's happening inside.
It's that inner turmoil,
Yeah.
the guilt,
The guilt that eats away at you, whether or not anyone else knows.
whether or not you get caught. Right.
Right, exactly. And the sermon's saying that internal struggle, that feeling of separation from the light, as it puts it, that's the core of personal judgment.
That's heavy.
It's not about flames and pitchforks,
No, it's not the medieval imagery.
It's about those very real consequences our choices have, on our inner lives, our inner selves.
Yeah. I think that's something we can all relate to.
I think so too.
That feeling when you've messed up,
Yeah.
whether anyone else knows or not, it eats at you.
Absolutely.
So that's personal judgment. And then you said there was historical judgment too.
Right. That's the next layer.
So if personal judgment is about individual choices,
Mm-hmm.
is historical judgment more about society as a whole facing the consequences?
You got it. The sermon's point is God doesn't just judge at the very end,
Right.
It's happening throughout history.
That's a different way to think about it. And it points to some pretty stark examples of the flood, Sodom and Gomorrah,
Right.
the destruction of Pompeii. These societies that, according to the sermon, they reached a point of such corruption
Wow.
that they faced, divine judgment.
That's intense, but I mean, who decides when a society's crossed that line, right? Like what's the tipping point?
That's a really good question. And that's where this sermon gets even more interesting, I'd say.
Okay.
It brings up the Amorites from Genesis 15.16.
Okay.
Their sin, it says, it hadn't yet reached its full measure.
So judgment was delayed.
Yeah, it was put off.
Wow.
And then it asks us to consider, right now, are our actions today,
Ooh.
are they pushing us closer to that kind of tipping point?
It's like the sermon is holding a mirror up to us
I think that's a great way to put it.
and saying, okay, society, where are we headed with this? Are we on the right track?
It's a powerful question.
Yeah, it is. It is a powerful question.
But, what I find really interesting is it doesn't just leave us with this doom and gloom picture.
Okay.
It also highlights some people,
Oh, right.
like Judge Chian Jiang-ho, Pastor An Chang-ho, Professor Gil Won-pyung. These individuals who, through their, their good deeds, their righteous actions, they're trying to hold back that tide.
Wow, so it's not inevitable.
It suggests that even when things look really, really bleak, individual actions can still make a difference.
That's encouraging, right? It's not all just...
Right. It's not just predetermined.
There's hope there.
Absolutely. A glimmer of hope.
And a reminder that we have agency even when things feel out of control.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's not all just, fate or destiny. We have a part to play.
This is getting really deep.
It is, isn't it? And we've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah. Well, we've covered personal judgment, historical judgment, and then there's that third one, the
big one.
The cosmic
judgment.
All right, so we've got to take a break here.
Yeah, we need a moment to process all this.
But when we come back, we'll delve into that final type of judgment. And trust me, it's where things get really interesting.
Oh, yeah. Buckle up.
Yeah.
So, yeah, cosmic judgment, the ultimate reckoning.
Right, the big one. As described in Matthew 24.3031. No one escapes this, right?
Right. It's universal. Everyone living and be dead.
Mm-hmm. Everyone faces the music.
They do.
This one feels different, though. Like the stakes are higher or something.
Absolutely, yeah. The sermon, it really drives home the point that this is it. No appeals.
Oh, money.
No second chances. The final word.
It's pretty heavy stuff. And then on top of that, there's that verse, Matthew 24.36.
Right.
No one knows the day or the hour.
Yeah.
So how are we supposed to get ready for something when we don't even know when it's happening?
Well, that's a really good question. And it's where faith comes in, right?
Mm-hmm.
The sermon suggests, actually, that not knowing the exact time,
Yeah.
it can be a blessing.
Really? A blessing.
In disguise, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, think about those doomsday calls.
Oh, right.
They set
Yeah.
these specific dates and then
nothing happens.
right, and then it's like, what was all that about?
Yeah.
People end up feeling disillusioned,
Yeah, let down.
misled. Like
Yeah.
all that energy focused on the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like when you obsess over a deadline, you miss out on everything leading up to it.
Exactly. You're so focused on the end,
Yeah.
you forget to actually, live
Live in the moment.
in the moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then the question becomes, what does it actually mean to be ready for judgment?
If we don't know when it's coming.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, the sermon seems to suggest that being ready isn't about, having a bunker stocked with supplies.
Well, it's not about hoarding toilet paper.
Yeah, exactly. Or building an underground shelter or whatever. It's more about how you live your life right now.
I think you're spot on there.
Yeah.
The sermon, it really emphasizes that point.
Mm.
It's not about abandoning your responsibilities,
Right.
or living in fear all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's about being mindful,
Mindful.
aware, living a life that really reflects God's presence.
Yeah.
This is all in Matthew 24.3738, by the way.
Oh, okay. Phew. That's a relief to hear.
Yeah.
I was starting to think about building a bunker in my backyard.
Better safe than sorry, right?
But seriously, how does the sermon say we should cultivate that awareness?
Well, it uses some really powerful images, I'd say.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Like the fugitive who has to sleep with one eye open,
Exactly.
always watching for danger.
Always alert.
Right. Or the mother who's instantly in tune with her baby's needs.
Right. That immediate connection.
It's about being present. Right.
Present.
Attentive, responsive, just like in those examples.
Yeah, that's it. And don't forget the parable of the 10 virgins.
Right. Yeah.
Some of them were prepared, some weren't.
Prepared for the bridegroom.
Exactly. And that underscores that being ready,
Yeah.
it requires, active preparation.
Not just waiting around.
Yeah, not just passively waiting.
It makes you think about those big moments in life.
It does, yeah. Those moments where it really counts.
Are you just going through the motions, or are you really present?
Are you all in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you all in? But what about the everyday stuff?
That's a good point.
I mean, the sermon talks about, 2 men working in a field,
Mhm.
2 women grinding grain, everyday stuff.
Right, like normal daily life.
Yeah, seemingly ordinary. One from each pair is taken, the other left behind.
Right, this is in Matthew 24.40041.
What's going on there?
That's where the sermon gets really interesting. It's saying that, well, looks can be deceiving, right?
Oh,
You can have two people doing the same thing, but what sets them apart is what's happening on the inside.
their motivations.
Yeah, their motivations, their intentions.
So it's not just what you do, it's why you do it.
Exactly. That's the real challenge, I think.
It's like those hidden picture puzzles, you know? You got to look beyond the surface to see what's really there.
That's a great analogy. And that's what the sermon's asking us to do, I think.
To look deeper.
But look deeper, yeah. It's not enough to just, go through the motions.
Right.
We're called to be attentive, discerning, to really cultivate that deeper awareness of what's truly important.
But how do you cultivate that? I mean, life is so busy.
Right. It can feel overwhelming.
Yeah. Chaotic, demanding.
It can be hard to find that stillness, that space for reflection.
Exactly. So how do we do it?
Well, the sermon suggests it starts with recognizing that judgment is real, not in a fearful way, not like obsessing over it,
Right.
but in a way that informs our choices.
So it's less about being terrified of punishment
Right. It's not about that.
and more about living with a sense of accountability.
I think that's a really good way to put it. It's like, hey, my choices matter.
Yeah.
They have consequences, and I'm accountable.
To yourself, to others, to God. It's like the sermon uses this analogy of a child who knows their parent is watching.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily scared of being punished, but they act differently because they know they're being observed.
Right. It changes their behavior.
Yeah, I get that. It's like when you know someone's looking over your shoulder at work.
Oh, yeah.
You're probably going to be a little more
A
careful.
little more diligent, maybe.
Yeah, a little more diligent about what you're doing.
And the sermon's saying that's the kind of awareness we need to cultivate.
To live with that
To
understanding.
live with the understanding that our actions matter,
Mm-hmm.
they have consequences, and that there's this higher authority we're accountable to.
Not to escape judgment, but to live in a way that aligns with our values, our beliefs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
To live a life of integrity.
Integrity even when no one's watching.
Even when no one's watching. That's powerful.
That really is. It brings us back to the whole question of what it means to be ready for judgment.
Right. Back to that central question.
The sermon doesn't give us a checklist.
No.
It's not saying, pack your bags.
Right. It's not a survival guide.
Right. It's about something much deeper.
Much deeper, yeah. I think you're right. It's not about having all the answers or being able to predict the future.
Mm-hmm.
It's more about a way of being,
A way of life.
a way of life, yeah.
It's about the journey, not the destination.
I like that. It's not about obsessing over that end goal,
Mm-hmm.
but about striving to live each day in a way that reflects our understanding of what really matters.
To live with intention, with purpose.
Yeah, exactly.
To be present.
Engaged in our lives.
And to recognize that we're all part of something bigger than ourselves.
Yes, absolutely. And that brings us to, well, I guess the big question.
Which is...
Amidst all this talk of, judgment, end time.
It can feel heavy?
It can't.
Is there room for hope in all this?
That's what we'll explore next. That is the big question, isn't it?
It feels like we've been walking this line between fear and hope.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. On one hand,
Mm-hmm.
we have these images of the world-ending judgment day,
Mm-hmm.
but then there's this message of faith, possibility of redemption.
You really hit the nail on the head there.
I think the sermon manages to do both,
Yeah,
It doesn't downplay the seriousness,
you're right.
but it also reminds us that there's hope.
There's that balance.
Yeah, that we can change,
Mm-hmm.
that aligning our lives with those values we talked about,
Mm-hmm.
it can make a real difference.
It's like a wake-up call, but not a scary one.
No, not a doom and gloom.
More like a, hey, pay attention, this matters.
Right, exactly.
But don't freak out.
Yeah,
Let's use this knowledge to make things better.
I like that.
Right.
I love that analogy.
It's about harnessing the power of these concepts,
Mhm.
not to scare us, but to inspire us.
To inspire positive change, yeah. Both in our own lives and in the world around us.
So it's not about passively waiting for Judgment Day.
No.
It's about actively working towards a more just, compassionate world.
Yeah,
A world that reflects the values we believe in.
absolutely. It's a call to action, isn't it?
It is. It really is.
A reminder that we all have a role to play in shaping the future,
Mm.
both individually and collectively.
I really like that. This idea that it's not just about, saving ourselves.
Right.
It's about It's about making the world a better place for everyone.
Yeah.
Gives a whole new meaning to being ready.
It does, doesn't it?
Thinking back on this whole deep dive, it's amazing how much we've covered.
It's a lot to process.
Yeah, we started with those dramatic images of the end times,
Mm-hmm.
unpacked 3 types of judgment,
3 different types,
explored what it means to be ready.
and all from this one sermon.
All from this one sermon based on Matthew 24.
It really makes you think about all the other perspectives out there, doesn't it?
It does. It really
What's the
does.
different interpretations?
But even within this one sermon, there were so many layers.
So much to unpack.
One thing that really struck me was this idea of living with intention,
Mm-hmm.
awareness,
Being present,
not just going through the motions,
making those conscious choices.
Yeah, making those choices that align with our values.
It's a powerful message, I think.
Yeah.
And it resonates,
Mhm.
whether you're coming at this from a religious perspective or not.
Absolutely. And I also thought it was interesting how the sermon kind of reframed judgment,
Mm-hmm.
not as something to be afraid of, but as a reality.
To be acknowledged.
Yeah, something that can motivate us.
To make better choices, to live better lives.
To be better people, really.
Yeah, to live with integrity.
This whole deep dive, it's really challenged me
Mhm.
to think about my own life.
Yeah, to examine those choices we make.
It's given me a new perspective, I think, on what it means to live a meaningful life.
And I think that's the power of these deep dives, isn't it?
It is. It is.
They encourage us to step outside our comfort zones
To explore, to question.
and to ultimately gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
Beautifully said. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive
Another one down.
into the concepts of judgment and the end of the world.
It's been a journey.
It has. Thank you all for joining us on this thought-provoking journey. We hope you'll join us next time for another deep dive. Until then, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking knowledge wherever it may lead you.